Hey everybody, I hope everyone is having a great day today. Today I want to talk about the late, great David Ruffin, who touched so many of our lives with his wonderful, raspy voice. David Ruffin was born Davis Eli Ruffin in Wynot, Mississippi. He was the third born son of Elias Eli Ruffin, a Baptist minister, and Ophelia Ruffin. His siblings were Quincy B. Ruffin, Rita Mae Ruffin, and Jimmy Lee Ruffin. Ruffin also had another sister, Rosine, who died as an infant. David Ruffin's parents were both natives of Mississippi. His father, Eli, worked as a truck driver at numerous lumber mills, and his mother, Ophelia, she worked out of their home. Eli's parents had moved from Alabama to Mississippi because of the terrible circumstances of living after the American Civil War. Prior to living in Alabama, David Ruffin's great grandparents, John Ruffin and Clara Ruffin, had moved from Bertie County, North Carolina. John Ruffin was a Civil War veteran fighting with the 14th United States Colored Heavy Artillery Regiment. Ruffin's father was strict and could be violent at times, allegedly. David's mother died 10 months after his birth in 1941, and his father remarried Earlene, who was a school teacher, in 1942. As a young child, David and his other siblings, brothers Quincy and Jimmy, and his sister Rita Mae, they traveled with their father and their stepmother as a family gospel group, opening shows for Mahalia Jackson and the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi, among others. David sang in the choir at Mount Salem Methodist Church, talent shows, and wherever else he was able to. So in 1955, at the age of 14, he left home under the guardianship of a minister named Eddie Bush and went to Memphis, Tennessee, with the purpose of pursuing the ministry. At 15 years, David went to Hot Springs, when he was 15 years old, Arkansas, with the jazz musician Phineas Newborn, Sr. There they played at the 50 Grand Ballroom and Casino. Billed as Little David Bush, David continued to sing at talent shows, worked with horses at a jockey club, and later became a member of the Dixie Nightingales. He also sang with the Soul Stirrers briefly after Johnny Taylor left. During David's travels as a teenager, he met Little Richard, Frankie Lamont, Bobby Womack, the Staple Singers, Elvis Presley, and more. After some of the great singers David admired, such as Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson, had left gospel music and went secular, David decided to do the same thing. Eddie Bush and his wife Dorothy Helen took the then 16-year-old Ruffin to Detroit, Michigan, where his brother Jimmy was pursuing a career in music while simultaneously working at the Ford Motor Company. After moving to Detroit with the Bushes, David recorded his first released record with the songs You and I in 1958 and Believe Me. These songs were recorded at Vega Records and released under the name Little David Bush, using the last name of his guardian. So in 1957, David Ruffin met Berry Gordy Jr., then a songwriter with ambitions of running his own label one day. David lived with Gordy's father, a contractor, and helped him do construction work on the building that would become Hitsville, USA, the headquarters for Gordy's Tamla Records, later called Motown Records label. Ruffin's brother Jimmy would eventually be signed to Tamla's Miracle Records label as an artist. Ruffin also worked alongside Marvin Gaye as an apprentice at Anna Records, a chess-distributed label run by Gordy's sister, Gwen Gordy Fuqua, and his songwriting partner, Billy Davis. When asked about David Ruffin in the Detroit Free Press in 1988, Gordy Fuqua said he was very much a gentleman. Yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. But the thing that really impressed me about David was that he was one of the only artists I've seen who rehearsed like he was on stage. According to David Ruffin, both he and Marvin Gaye would pack records for Anna Records. David Ruffin created music as both the vocalist and drummer in the Voice Masters, a doo-wop style combo, and eventually started recording at Anna Records and recorded the song I'm in Love One of These Days in 1961 with the Voice Masters, a group which included future Motown producer Lamont Dozier. At one time, the Voice Masters also included another future Temptations member, Melvin Franklin, who David said was his cousin. David signed to Anna Records as a solo artist, but was not successful there. So David eventually met the Temptations group. His older brother Jimmy went on a Motortown review tour with the Temptations, and he told David that they needed someone to sing tenor. David shared his interest in joining the group with Otis Williams, who lived very close to Ruffin in Detroit. In January 1964, David Ruffin became a member of the Temptations after founding member Elbridge Al Bryant was fired from the group. Some people might not remember Elbridge Al Bryant because he left the group before they became successful. David's first recording session with the group was January 9th, 1964. Though both David and Jimmy were considered, David was chosen because of the way he performed. After joining the Temptations, David Ruffin initially sang backgrounds while the role of lead singer mostly alternated between Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams. He did sing a few lead parts both on stage and in the studio during his first year with the group, but his leads on these studio tracks would not be released for over a year, as they were not considered good enough to showcase his vocals. Mr. Smokey Robinson, who produced and co-wrote most of the Temptations material at that time, thought that if he could write just the perfect song for David's voice, then they would have a hit. This was achieved with the song My Girl. It was recorded in November 1964 and released a month later. It became the group's first #1 single in 1965. My Girl subsequently became the Temptations' signature song and elevated David to lead singer and frontman. The follow-up songs to My Girl were also extremely successful singles and included David's lead hits, It's Growing in 1965, Since I Lost My Baby, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Beauty's Only Skin Deep, I Know I'm Losing You, All I Need, I Wish It Would Rain, and more. Ruffin also shared lead vocals on the 1967 hit single You're My Everything with Eddie Kendricks. David Ruffin's passionate performances captivated the audiences and fans. According to Otis Williams, David, playfully nicknamed Ruff by the group, was a natural comedian and a hard-working singer when he first joined the group. Ruffin's most notable non-vocal contribution to the Temptations was the masterminding of their trademark four-headed microphone stand. This enabled the other members to sing and do their dances without having to crowd around one microphone, while the lead singer would sing into a separate microphone. By 1967, there were problems in the group. David became addicted to cocaine and began missing rehearsals and performances. Refusing to travel with the other Temptations, Ruffin and his then-girlfriend, the beautiful Tammy Terrell, traveled in a custom limo with the image of his trademark black-rimmed glasses painted on the door. After the Supremes had their name changed to Diana Ross and the Supremes in early 1967, David Ruffin felt that should also happen in his group, and he began demanding that the group name be changed to David Ruffin and the Temptations. This led to disagreements between David and Otis Williams. David also demanded an accounting of the group's money. This caused friction between David and Berry Gordy. In June 1968, David was fired from the Temptations and was replaced with Dennis Edwards, a former member of the Contours, who had been a friend of David and the group as a whole beforehand. David began turning up unannounced at Temptations concerts during Edward's first few dates with the group. When the group started to perform a David era song such as My Girl or Ain't Too Proud to Beg, David would suddenly walk onto the stage, take the microphone from Edward's hands, and steal the show, entertaining the fans. According to Dennis Edwards, the adulation and Ruffin's pleas convinced the other Temptations to give David a second chance. But when he arrived late to what was to be his return show with the group in Gaithersburg, Maryland, the Temptations decided to keep Edwards and drop considerations of rehiring David Ruffin. So in October of 1968, David Ruffin filed suit against Motown Records, seeking a release from the label and an accounting of his money. Motown countersued to keep David from leaving the label. The case was later settled. The settlement required Ruffin to remain with Motown to finish out his initial contract. So David joined Motown as a solo artist and always had a separate contract from the other Temptations, which some felt caused issues within the group. The album covers of Ruffin's solo debut LP released in 1969, Ruffin's first solo single was a song originally intended for the Temptations, My Whole World Ended the Moment You Left Me. The single from the album, also entitled My Whole World Ended, was released in 1969 and reached the U.S. pop and R&B top 10. This was followed by the 1969 album Feeling Good. A third album titled David was recorded in 1970 to 1971, but was shelved by Motown and did not see commercial release until 2004. In 1970, David recorded an album with his brother Jimmy, I Am My Brother's Keeper, for which they had minor hits with When My Love Hand Comes Tumbling Down and Your Love Was Worth Waiting For. His next official release from Motown did not arrive until 1973, when David Ruffin was released. While his solo career initially showed promise, Ruffin went into decline, reportedly in part because of his cocaine use and the lack of support from Motown. His final top 10 hit was Walk Away from Love in 1975, produced by Van McCoy, which reached number 9 on the pop charts. It was also Ruffin's only entry into the UK charts as a solo artist, and it was a hit there as well. Making it into the top 10, it peaked at number 10 in early 1976. The single sold over 1 million copies and was awarded a gold disc by the RIAA in February 1976. After leaving Motown in 1977, David Ruffin recorded for Warner Brothers, releasing the albums So Soon We Change in 1979 and Gentleman Ruffin in 1980. He later signed with RCA Records, accompanied by his friend Eddie Kendricks, who himself started experiencing problems with the Temptations. So in 1982, David and Eddie Kendricks rejoined the Temptations for the recording of their album Reunion and a tour to promote the album. The album included the R&B hit Standing on the Top with Rick James. The reunion tour was short-lived, however, as Ruffin started to miss shows as a result of his cocaine addiction, leading the group to be fined thousands of dollars. Otis Williams fired David from the group for the second and final time, along with Eddie Kendricks. David started touring with Eddie Kendricks, who by then dropped the S from his last name, as a duo act in 1985. That year, longtime Temptations fans Hall & Oates teamed up with Ruffin and Kendrick to perform at the reopening of the Apollo Theater in New York. Their performance was released as a successful live album and single. The four of them also sang a medley of Temptation hits at Live Aid on July 13th, 1985. In 1985, a live medley of The Way You Do the Things You Do and My Girl was released by Hall & Oates featuring David and Eddie Kendrick. It reached number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100, number 12 on the Adult Contemporary chart, and number 40 on the R&B chart. The single earned David his first and only Grammy nomination. John Oates later wrote a minor hit single for David and Kendrick, but the two duos fell out. After being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Temptations in 1989, David Ruffin, Kendrick, and Dennis Edwards began touring and recording as Ruffin, Kendrick, Edwards, former leads of the Temptations. In 1991, they completed a successful month-long tour of England, which grossed nearly $300,000. At the time of David's death, they were planning a European tour. He had finished recording the single Hurt the One You Love for Motor City Records. It wasn't mentioned in the movie, but in 1961, David was married to Sandra Barnes, with whom he had 3 daughters, Cheryl, Nedra, and Kimberly. He also had a son named David. So after completing a successful month-long tour of England with Kendricks and Edwards, David Ruffin died on June 1, 1991 from a drug overdose. Ruffin reportedly collapsed at a crack house where he had gone with his friend Donald Brown, according to authorities. He was taken to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania where he died from an adverse reaction to drugs. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that David and a man named William Noel split 10 vials of crack cocaine hours before he died. Although the cause of death was ruled an accident, David Ruffin's family and friends suspected foul play, claiming that a money belt containing $40,000 was missing from his body. I saw an interview with David's daughter Nedra on YouTube where she talks about believing that there was foul play in her father's death. She said her dad was clean for a couple months. She said when her mother and sisters went to Philadelphia at the coroner's office, they pulled his file and a picture fell out. It fell out of his file and her sister Kim saw it and said it looked like her dad drowned. She said his head was big like a basketball when her dad had a very slim face. She said his clothes was not in the box and they found that his clothes was very bloody. They found out his clothes was bloody and his clothes was burned in an incinerator in Philadelphia. She said that they went to see her dad and examined his body and he had scratches on his chest, scraped up knees, his feet was scraped up. She said she believes he fought somebody for his life. She looked so hurt. I felt terrible for her. I can imagine her pain. And you guys can look it up on YouTube and watch the interview yourself. But David was a talented legend, and his work will continue to live on. R.I.P. Mr. David Ruffin.